Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this wellness coaching session for parents of returning students from the classes of 2021, 2022, and 2023 with Susan Howard, P17. My name is Nicole Ouellette, Associate Director of Development and Volunteer Manager of the Parent Leadership Council, or PLC. We thank you for attending today's event, and we hope you and your family are safe and healthy during this time. This talk is being recorded and will be distributed along with presentation materials after the event. Please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box, not the chat, and we will try to get through as many questions as we can after Susan's presentation. Now to briefly introduce our speaker. Susan Howard is an integrative wellness professional with a master's in kinesiology integrative wellness from Point Loma Nazarene University. She is certified by the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaching. Susan assists clients in adopting the dimensions of wellness into lifestyle practices to create a joyful, passionate, and purposeful life. She is also the parent of 2 young adult children working in the STEM field, including a mother from the class of 2017. I would now like to turn it over to Susan. Welcome, Susan.
Hi, Nicole. Thank you so much for this evening's platform. I'm really excited to share some tips and really dive into what wellness coaching is. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so wellness coaching for returning students, parents of the returning students, excuse me. This is a collaborative process for positive change. So we're going to actually talk about strategies to create positive outcomes that are based on scientific, evidence-based approaches to wellness. So first off, I want to ask you as active parents, this is going to be an active session here, and I do want to have some participation. I have a poll for you. Have you ever experienced wellness coaching before? So yes or no. And we're going to talk about what wellness coaching actually is. Okay. All right. Okay, so we're going to learn quite a bit today. It looks like we have 83% that have not experienced wellness coaching before, and 70% that have. 17% that have, excuse me. Okay, let me close this up. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what wellness coaching is, and this process that we're going to be doing today is going to be both wellness coaching process and also wellness coaching descriptive space, so that you're going to understand the process of wellness coaching. So wellness coaching is a scientific evidence-based approach that uses cognitive behavior therapy, positive psychology, and motivational interviewing, and techniques in a non-judgmental collaborative supportive partnership. So we're going to be exploring the dimensions of wellness, accessing one's vision, goal, strengths, resources, and develop the person's self-efficacy and autonomy in this experiential approach. And this will help to achieve the change in wellness. So the next question I'm going to ask you is, have you ever created a vision for wellness before? Now, since you have not had wellness coaching, you may or may not have done this, but you may have just done it on your own. A wellness vision could be losing weight, it could be eating better, it could be exercising more. So to kind of give you a little bit of an idea of what a vision would be. Okay. So wellness vision. So we've got 27% that said yes, and 73% said no. So what we're going to do today by the end of the session is I want you to understand the scientific benefits and have an understanding of some of the wellness coaching strategies so that you can actually implement some wellness coaching for your children. We're going to look at the tools, the action plan, and help to create some positive change and support for your HMC students. And by learning and understanding the OARS method, which is a motivational interviewing technique, We will create simple steps to make positive change. You as parents will have the ability to learn practical methods and bring positivity into each day and support the dimensions of wellness. So the next polling question I want to ask you is, what are your goals? A, physical, B, emotional, C, social, or D, intellectual? And these different dimensions, they do have different ways to approach it. And some of them are intertwined. So you can actually have a physical goal that intertwines emotional, social, and intellectual. So it can be a crossover. So if you have that. Okay, so 73% said physical, 91% emotional, social 45%, and intellectual 55%. So obviously some crossover. So our goals today is we're going to embrace the process of wellness coaching. We're going to learn and implement the OARS method. We're going to explore and discover some of the benefits, the scientific benefits of mindfulness and breath work. And then we're going to give a template to custom action plan to increase support for you as parents and for your students in the dimensions of wellness. So here's some interesting data, the feedback that you gave prior to today's session. There are 44 of you, and 32 of you said that emotional wellness was of importance to you today. Intellectual, there were 22, physical wellness, 19, academic success, which would be intellectual wellness, 17, resources, 16, and connections, working with others from a social perspective, 12. So we're going to actually be looking and diving into each one of those categories from a more of an inquisitive curiosity perspective with OARS. So to kind of give you an idea of what wellness coaching works with, it works with these different dimensions that I did mention. And we're going to define each one of them so that you kind of have a gauge to where you are, where your children are, and be able to kind of have a template of asking open-ended questions with these different definitions. And this is from the 6 dimensions of wellness from the National Wellness Institute. So the first is emotional, acceptance of feelings, management of emotions and stress, ability to center, stress resilience, being attuned to others' emotions. Physical wellness is more of the regular exercise, healthy nutrition habits, self-care, sense of vitality and energy, limiting alcohol, drugs, tobacco, being connected with nature. Another is social, being with positive connections, encouraging community, giving and receiving social support, vulnerability, compassion, love, integrity, all of those are part of the social. Then intellectual is more of that creative space of the mind, stimulating mental activities, learning, reading, problem solving, current with events. Obviously, Harvey Mudd is a very intellectual space. And then to address some of the resources that you do have that really connect you to wellness are parent relations. Obviously, the Harvey Mudd College has some great support here to take advantage of. Connecting to your community, connecting to other parents to really help to collaborate in different experiences. That's a great resource for you. There's also applications of mindfulness, breath work, wellness coaching. I'm actually working on one myself right now. And then active wellness coaching, really doing one-on-one or group training, which is something that will really create more of a individualized approach for yourself. So we are on our way to support you and your student with the positive OARS approach. Now, the reason why I picked this picture, it is very symbolic. You can see the cobblestone going up. We could say that's Mount Baldy since we're close by at Harvey Mudd. But really in this journey, every step is a success. So even if it's something where we stumble, we're learning, we're gaining new strengths, we're finding new resources, we're understanding support. So it really is a journey when we're working in wellness coaching. So what is the OARS approach? OARS is used in motivational interviewing, and first and foremost, it's about active listening. So you really want to be able to establish both verbal and nonverbal. And that's really the key to an effective outcome. And it's really about having your child be able to tell the story, or whomever you might be working with this approach. So an open-ended question would be something that's more of a descriptive question, not a yes or no. So what does wellness look like to you? It could be, what does physical wellness look like to you, John? Just made up John as the student. And he'd be like, well, what do you mean? And I could say, well, from physical activity, what do you think would be a ideal way to look at wellness? And that way, that actually gets them to talk more, paint a picture of an ideal day at HMC, if that was something where they're trying to kind of manage their time between social and courses and other activities that they may have. This is really helping them to be more in the space of self-efficacy and autonomy. So they're actually creating ideas and processing things in a way that they're actually going into their own database to figure out what looks like a solution to them. And then from that, we have affirmations. So we respond with positive commentary on what they're sharing. That builds that self-efficacy, excuse me. So sounds like you were successful in that task when you were physically active and you used to wake up in the morning and go running 2-3 miles a day. Does that sound right? And then they can kind of have like that aha moment. Similarly enough, in reflecting, we're reflecting the listening. So it sounds like when you did do that running, it made you feel better, right? So you're always building on the conversation. And this may sound very simple, the simple approach, but when you do it systematically, it works on a psychological basis so that we're really bringing in the positive space so that they can really process things. Granted, you may or may not know this, but the frontal lobe of a child doesn't actually develop until age 25. So as intelligent as all of your children are, there is processes that they're still learning. So this kind of approach really does help them to actually process what they want to solve or create in their life. So those reflections, it's a way of finding, ways to be open in a non-judgmental manner. And then lastly is to summarize. So gather the positive feedback and say, here's what I'm hearing. Let's see if I got this. Is that on track? And that's really so that there's no misunderstanding, but they're also hearing what they just said to you. So it really helps to reinforce that information. So here we're going to use the chat box if you would like to. What is your biggest win of your HMC experience? And how can you build on that? And what are the qualities or lessons you learned from that experience? Sorry, I kind of jumped ahead. Let me just go back. Now, the reason why I mention this, and I can't see the chat box right now, Nicole, so I don't know exactly where it went. Yeah, I don't know where it went. The reason why I'm asking this question is once again an open-ended question. So you can use this with your child to kind of help them to kind of even have a dialogue, but then you can also personalize or make it more specific to what's been a biggest win of your HMC experience of staying active or physically active or socially active, or your academic success. When did you find that you were the most successful with your courses? Those kind of things that kind of help your child actually create and process, and you can have a dialogue with them in regards to that. The next question is, what is your biggest challenge of your HMC experience? So once again, we're really kind of diving into this in a way that's going to help them to process And then be able to follow up with a question of what are some of the things that you can do to support yourself? What are some of the resources that are available to you to help you with that? Painting a picture of what it would look like to overcome this challenge. Those are the kind of questions. So as I work through these questions with you, these are tools, resources that you can use and practice with your student. And then lastly is formulate an open-ended question for your HMC students. So here's just some of the ways that you can start it. We've already given you a couple of ideas, but paint a picture. So paint a picture of what it looked like when you were most successful last year in XYZ class, or paint a picture of what you would like to see at the end of this year, or describe what success looks like to you in terms of social experience, or describe what success looks like to you in terms of academic success. These type of questions are helping them to really formulate what's going to be important to them. What is your biggest win? What is your biggest challenge? And then if you want to brainstorm, this is actually a really great way to be open. Once again, we want to be non-judgmental, because some brainstorming ideas may not be congruent with your thoughts, but you want to be open so that it doesn't stint the brainstorming idea. But if you were to brainstorm ideas regarding whatever this topic may be, what would that look like? And then always remember to lead with curiosity. So you want to make sure that you resist telling them what to do. I know that probably all of you are very successful, and we do have a lot of experience ourselves, but we want, once again, to have them develop their self-efficacy, their autonomy. So we want them to actually be discovering their own solutions. And then we want to understand their motivation. What's their why? Why are they talking about this? Why are they wanting to make a change? Why are they wanting to improve? And that will actually instill more motivation into what they're discussing. And then remember to listen with empathy, to really be there for them. Non-judgmental is a critical component of this success. And then lastly, empower them with achievable goals and techniques to overcome barriers. And I'm going to talk about that, what achievable goals are and some of the techniques to overcome barriers. So these achievable goals, we call them SMART goals. I don't know if you've used this before, but basically a SMART goal is something that's specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. So when I say specific, if they were to want to do something that was a physical goal, they would start out by saying, I want to start running again 3 times a week, 2 miles each time at 8 a.m. in the morning. I'm going to get up early, get my run in beforehand. And then kind of have a litmus test here to see if that's something that's attainable, it's realistic. And then you want to put a timeline. So you want to have it a short timeline. So it'd be like 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And you can do the same type of thing with other types of wellness goals. So now if we were to be creative and really paint a picture of your student's ideal HMC experience, would really have you kind of brainstorm. And this is a exercise that you can do later, either later this evening or this weekend when you have more time, but just kind of bring out the biggest dream that you want, and then start to take it apart into smaller steps. And that's the process to success. So now we're going to talk about the science of mindfulness and the options that we have. So mindfulness, a lot of you have heard about it, especially with the pandemic and a lot of stress and concern about the mental health and social isolation and so many things that we're having to really process. So mindfulness actually is a mediator between self-care and well-being, and it actually does create positive change in the brain. So it reduces stress, it controls anxiety, it promotes emotional health, it enhances self-awareness. It actually can lengthen attention span. As you get older, it can actually reduce age-related memory loss. It can generate kindness, it improves sleep, and it also can decrease blood pressure. What's important, and this is really something I wanted to stress, is to find the right fit, because there's all different kinds of mindfulness, as you'll see on this list. And so you don't have to be in a seated meditation in a quiet room. That's only one type. So I'm going to show you several here, but make sure that for yourself and for your child that you're giving different options, because there's going to be different ones that are going to resonate with you. So find the right fit for you, and you're going to be more successful with it and want to do it more often. So breath work is one that we're actually going to talk about in a little bit. So I'm going to skip that for right now. Guided imagery is something where you could actually close your eyes and picture yourself at a vacation spot that you've been to before, or a place that you want to go to, and really think of it in vivid colors and smells, using all your 5 senses to really create that space. And that actually creates the approach of allowing everything else to kind of disappear. So it's actually a process that creates more mindfulness. Body scan is almost like if you were going through an MRI and going throughout your whole entire body, relaxing each component of your body one step at a time. You could either be doing that in a seated position or lying down. Seated meditation, which we kind of spoke about briefly, is just sitting in a chair, just keeping a quiet mind, closing the eyes, using breath work. Mindful eating, which some people don't even know about, but really being present in your eating, noticing the colors, noticing the smells, noticing the flavor, really being present with each bite. That is this type of mindfulness. Mindful listening, actually listening to someone's words or listening to the sounds of nature. Movement meditation. Now this is for someone that would be very challenging to stay still. You don't have to. You could be on a hike. You could be on a run. You could be doing high intensity interval training where you're actually keeping your mind present in the moment. That is actually movement meditation. Another one is gratitude practice, keeping a journal, highlighting 3 positive things that you've done for today, or 3 things that you're grateful for in your life. And then nature meditation, similar to going on a hike. You can actually just be in nature or just step outside, get the sunshine, get the trees, the wind blowing through your hair, and allowing the process of nature to really clear the mind as well. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have all of you actually get comfortable here in your seats. We're going to talk about science of breath work and the how-tos for this. And diaphragmatic breathing is really the most powerful way to manage stress in a short amount of time. So it's also known as belly breathing. And what it's going to do is it's going to expand the diaphragm and the abdomen. And then we're going to exhale, we're going to squeeze all that air out. And it's going to help in so many different ways, from a decrease in heart rate to decrease in blood pressure, increase oxygen into the brain. And it benefits us in many different ways. Typically, our sympathetic system is our fight and flight. So we tense up. So when we drop our shoulders down, our parasympathetic system starts to activate. We rest and digest. We have the ability to recover more quickly. Our cells repair. We have better regeneration. And then it also, breathwork reduces anxiety, helps with sleep, digestion, and mental clarity. So this basic exercise we're going to walk through right now is you can be seated at your chair. You want to kind of have your feet firmly on the floor with your knees right in line with your heels, and kind of having like a 90-degree angle from your knees to your hips. And you're going to place your hands on your belly. All right. You can widen your feet so they're about hip width apart. You're going to inhale through your nose or your mouth. Either one is fine. And when you inhale, you're going to expand and fill up your belly with your hands. And then you're going to exhale, you're going to squeeze, you're going to draw the navel to the spine. You're almost going to make like a little C curve with your back. So if you think of cat-cow, if you're familiar with yoga, the cat is that exhale and the cow is the inhale. So we're going to go ahead and practice this with a count of 6. You're going to inhale, expand, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you're going to exhale, squeeze, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And when you squeeze, you kind of want to have your pelvic floor kind of tilt up, so it's going to help to push the air out. Let's try that again. Inhale, expand, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Make sure that there's space between the ears and the shoulders. And then exhale, squeeze, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And simply just doing this for 1 minute can actually create this, this reduction in anxiety, reduce the cortisol. And so this is a great way to reset the brain and the body in a short amount of time. So here's kind of the short list for developing your own formula for supporting your HMC students. Basically talking about the vision, painting a picture of the ideal day, or it could be of that specific space that you're wanting to discuss with your child. Visions and goals, what does that look like to you? Action plan, what does that feel like? And describe the path to get there. Remembering SMART goals, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, timely goals. And then remember that you have different choices. So, and finding the right fit that works for you, whether it be breath work, mindfulness, wellness, lifestyle, medicine, techniques. I can go just shortly into that, you know, getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep, having a good, healthy diet with plant-based fruits and vegetables, making sure that you're getting 150 exercise minutes per week, which could be 30 minutes 5 times or 20 minutes, you know, 7 times a week. And then lastly is accountability, figuring out ways that you're going to support yourself to make these choices. And that can be through collaboration with other friends. It could be through an app. It could be through your own journaling, but to find ways that you're actually making yourself accountable for these different steps that you're creating within your vision and goal. So here's some of the references. You'll be getting those just so you can see a little bit about where all of this scientific evidence information comes from. And I just want to say thank you. I want to make sure that you can add wellness coaching into your relationships and communication. And please feel free to reach out to me for any additional support.
Thank you, Susan. That was really great. Wonderful presentation. And we've got a number of questions that I'd love to pose to you. And anyone in the audience, if you have something that we're not covering here, please feel free to continue to submit questions in the Q&A, and we'll get to as many as we possibly can. So I'd like to start with this one. How do I get my son to focus on the positives and not dwell so much on the negatives while still being supportive for his frustrations while in distance learning or Zoom University?
Yeah, so that is such a good question, Nicole, because that's really what wellness coaching is about, is focusing on the positive. So the first question I would ask is to be, what is something positive that you've been able to appreciate during this time? It's really giving them the ability to kind of look at it from a different lens. There are a lot of, things that people are, for lack of a better word, wishing that they could change at this point in time because of the pandemic and the situation that we have. And it's okay to recognize that and say, I hear your frustration. I hear that there's a lot of things that you wish could, be changed right now. But if we can look at this from a different lens, what are the positive things that you've been able to take away from this time? And just giving them that opportunity to look at it from that perspective is a way to shift it. And then from there, you ask more questions from the answers that they that they gave and reinforce that positive space.
Great, thank you. Here's another one. How can parents support students through some of the trouble spots and some of the challenging times that parents have observed during remote learning? Things like Zoom fatigue, the lack of their typical extended breaks during the semester, etc.
Yeah, that's a good question. And Zoom fatigue it's a world phenomenon now. So we're really needing to be mindful of it. And that mindfulness actually is a space that we can work on. So once again, starting with open-ended questions, to be inquisitive, to say, what's been your energy level with the Zoom, with the Zoom classes? Do you feel that you have the same energy level? Do you feel like you're tired? Do you think that there's anything that you could do to potentially help you to have more energy? So creating those questions that help them to actually brainstorm and think of ways is a great methodology. Another one, which you do need to ask permission, but it does lean towards a positive outcome, is to be, I've heard some information about Zoom fatigue. Would you like me to share it with you? And by getting the permission from your child to say, yeah, Mom, I'd like to hear that. Be like, well, great. I did hear that there's a lot of Zoom fatigue, and because we're doing so much sitting, and I've heard that if you get up every, 50 minutes, 55 minutes and take a walk outside, or do 1 minute of breath work, or, make sure that you get 20, 30 minutes of exercise, throughout the day, that'll actually help to alleviate that Zoom fatigue. So those are some of the tips that would be beneficial in a dialogue with your child. And then what was the other part, Nicole? Zoom fatigue, and what was the other?
Oh, managing the, let's see, maximizing the breaks that the students do have, since they're not having the full, for example, the semester fall break that they're accustomed to, and that's a challenge.
Yeah, so that's something that we are all kind of shifting and having to learn how to create these little, mini vacations, for lack of a better word, within our space. And I know the rigor of Harvey Mudd, since, my son did go there. So I do know that it is quite a challenge. But I do like to think of him as being somewhat of an example that he was like active physically, and he was in HVZ, and he found different ways to create some social engagement, some physical engagement with the current environment. We know that it is, obviously more challenging with the physical distancing, but as much as we may not think like the online games are that much of a break, it actually is a social space for them. They're really engaging from their mind in a different way than they would be if they were, in an actual class or studying. So that's one way. Helping, once again, asking permission about, the breath work, helping them to maybe entice them to go for a hike or a bike ride, or find some other means that might be a little bit of a break in nature. Could be some art, creative ways of painting, or doing something that may be a hobby like guitar, or an instrument that they may find. So really kind of being inquisitive. Like something that I asked a while back to my client was, with the free time that we potentially have, because we're not commuting and we're not doing all this, what's something that you would like to do? Would you like to learn a new language? Would you like to do some art? And so thinking of it from a different lens, and taking these little mini vacations, whether it be a picnic or a little activity outside, and finding some different ways to be creative. I know that it is challenging space, that we're not in our normal, vacation time, but to take 5 minutes is actually even more beneficial for the body, because with stress, if we continue to go, our body doesn't have a way to process it. But if we manage our stress on a daily basis and take these little mini breaks, it's actually going to serve us even better for the long run.
Great, thank you. So on this call, we've got parents of returning students, and some of them may be living at home with families, but many of them have gone away and are living in pods. So here's a question from a parent asking for your thoughts on how to get ready for her students' return home for the winter break, how to establish boundaries, how to get to know her child again after being away and growing and changing.
Yeah, those are great questions. And we do want to use that OARS method for this process, and even that brainstorming space for this process to be, for that child to be like, you know, you're coming home soon, and I'd love to be able to brainstorm with you on how you see it's the most ideal way for us to work and coexist together, given the current situation with COVID. And giving that framework is actually going to give them the ability to have feedback. You're going to have the ability to listen actively and share, and also to kind of tap into what are some of the wins that you had while you were away that you think that may be beneficial to incorporate into you know, living at home again. So those would be some of the suggestions that I would recommend. And then from getting to know your child again, you know, be able to say, you know, are there some ways that you would like to, you know, connect while you're home, that we can do some different things together, you know, since you will be, you know, living in the house.
Great. Another question, I'm struggling with how to support my college student, how much to push, when to motivate, when to step back. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. And sometimes it's okay to be vulnerable. Actually, it's okay to be vulnerable a lot of the times. But as a parent, when we can actually tell our child that, you know, we'd like to have a conversation with them, and that, you know, and this is me just kind of doing the role playing as the parent, saying, you know, I really want to be able to support you, to know, you know, when it's best to motivate you, when it's best to step back. And I really would like to hear your feedback on what your thoughts are on that. And what do you find to be supportive? What do you find to be supportive when I'm doing something? What do you find to be not supportive? I want to be here for you. And it's a very direct way of asking. And surprisingly enough, you're gonna get some answers. You may not like all the answers, but you're gonna get some answers. So to be active listening, process it in a way of affirming and reflecting and summarizing. And then you can also ask permission, you know, say, I've noticed before that when I motivated you by XYZ, that you've thought that worked well for you. Does that still work well for you? So you can ask permission for things that you think that you already do know, just to make sure that they could give the confirmation, because then you get their buy-in and you get the autonomy that they're actually wanting to have that same type of support.
Great. Here's a question that is more personal for you as a parent of a Mudder. Can you talk a little bit about the concerns that you had for your student while at Mudd, and then maybe provide some reassurance now that your student is several years out and working and in that next chapter?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think I speak for more than myself in the sense of, like, your children being at Harvey Mudd, they have such a high level, high standard of themselves, that a lot of what they're doing is self-directed, because they would not have gotten there without it. So knowing that and understanding that, I think is super important to start with. There's a part that when you go away, you know, Harvey Mudd is so intense, and you're wanting to, you know, be there for them, but you also have to let them have that space. So I was very much a communicator by text and noticed that there was not a lot of response back, but there were the key times, either, asking if I could take them out for brunch, or if there was a picture of our little long-haired chihuahua to send to him, that he would text me back. Just different ways to engage him so that I knew that he was being, being somewhat responsive, and I knew that he was okay. But in general, it was just a blanket of, I am here for you. I'm here to support you. However I can do that for you. I know that you're busy, and I know that you're going to have a lot of time that you're not going to be able to reach out to me, but just know that I'm here for you.
Great. How can parents help and encourage their students to build relationships with their professors and then more generally advocate for themselves as a young adult?
Yeah, that's obviously, for most Harvey Mudd students, they've been resourceful, right? So once again, asking an open-ended question like, what are some of the key ways that you've been successful in the past in developing, relationships with your professors and with your students, and what was that outcome? That's one way. Another way is to ask, are there different support tools out there to help you to build relationships? Because sometimes the student really needs to kind of work through that. And then the other is to ask permission again and say, I was actually online and I saw the different, information that was available. Would you like me to share what I've found as far as building relationships with the professor or building relationships with the community? If they say, no, mom, I got it, then you know that they already have it. And then you can say, okay, great. Well, can you share a little bit more about, what you're doing in that regard, and what's working for you? So the what's working for you is a really good question. What's been one of your biggest wins as far as connecting with a professor? How has that helped you? Because sometimes they need the reminder that having those connections with the professors really do help. And so those would be a few takeaways.
Great. One parent specifically asked about exercise and fitness. My student does some exercises daily, which is good, but no cardio or walking, and stays at the computer almost all the time doing schoolwork. And this is probably especially noticeable in distance learning. Any ideas on how to encourage him to move more?
Yeah, and they are not alone. We have lots of different smart devices now, like the Apple Watch and many others that are out there, and they do help with reminders and whatnot. That can be potentially helpful, but it just depends on the individual. So once again, it would be a question to them and say, what are some ways that you think that you could be more physically active when you're on the computer all day? And have you found that when you move a little bit more, that you feel more energy? What's been your experience? Some of those kind of questions to kind of help them to get it, get that connection. Something that I would ask would be hey, I would love to be able to have a game of some sorts of trying to stay active while I'm at the computer all day. Do you have any ideas for me? So almost directing it to him, but being for yourself. But then they'd be like, oh, well, mom, you could be doing squats every hour, 5 minutes, something like that, where you're actually getting their ideas. And then lastly would be, do you think having some cardiovascular activity through the day, does it scientifically help the brain? And it's a question, right? So they'll be like, I don't know. Well, let's do some research, or maybe they do know, and maybe you'll be like, well, do you think that having a little bit of exercise a day might help you to have more energy or to help you to get through this? So those are some of the different ideas. And then we did talk a little bit about maybe having a challenge to have a group. If you have different friends, that you can have like your own little group that, you know, had a little activity challenge. We've also talked about, you know, on the other webinar to potentially maybe do something for the Harvey Mudd students where they could get a little bit more active. Those would be some of the suggestions.
Excellent. What's your perspective on the benefits of wellness coaching, and sort of just scratching the surface here tonight for many folks who are new to that space? Can you talk a little bit about the benefits and advice for next steps to continue learning and practicing?
Yeah, absolutely. So in regards to the benefits, it does cross over all dimensions of wellness. So, you know, improvement in physical, emotional, social, intellectual, for those that are working, occupational, and then there's even a spiritual component, which is more of like one's life's purpose, or just, you know, fulfillment of doing whatever they're doing throughout the day. So having the ability to actually speak to someone and kind of put your thoughts together, have the idea of, you know, what your vision is, even if it's through pictures, what those feelings are, and then having a goal and creating an action plan, like the necessary steps. If you think it from a scientific perspective, if you were to do a science experiment, you wouldn't just do the experiment, you would actually map everything out. So wellness coaching does the same thing for us in a means of a lifestyle. So we're looking at our physical activity, we're looking at our nutrition, what foods we're eating, how we're sleeping, what social engagement we have, what relationships are beneficial for us. We're looking at how we process our emotions, and what's different ways that we can reframe the day, even though like we had to, you know, cancel our vacation, but we still have the ability to like be together and have our health, and doing those kind of reframes. All those kind of things actually tie into wellness coaching, so that we can actually create the most supportive, collaborative environment for not only for ourselves, but everyone else that we're connected with. Oh, I can't hear you, Nicole.
Shoot. Sorry. Looks like we have time for maybe one or two more questions. And I have one here about, can you give some insight to a parent who's trying to parent an adult child and remain a positive force in their life, even though they are worried about the student and critical of some of the choices that they're making?
Yeah, so first and foremost, mental health is so important, and to be supportive in that space, and to know if there is any, you know, real concern, that you want to make sure that you get the proper support. That is first and foremost. From a individual perspective, to be able to be vulnerable in the sense of being like, I'm here for you, and I'd like to be able to support you in any way, shape, or form possible. What are some, kind of goes back to that question that we had before, what are some of the ways that I've been able to support you in the past that you'd like me to support you in the future? Or is there any new ways that you would like me to support you? In regards to the choices that they're making, you can ask questions such as, in what way do you feel like this choice is supporting you? Whatever, you can fill in the blank, whatever that choice that they're making. How do you feel that this is supporting you? So you can be from a curiosity perspective. And this is done in a non-judgmental way. So it would be like, from a curiosity perspective, how do you feel that, you know, going to sleep at 3 o'clock helps you, you know, create the most alert body for you. I'm curious. And so those kind of questions, as interesting as it may sound to you right now, you are actually going to get a response. So it's a way of opening up that dialogue. And then lastly is, we do learn from our decisions. So those choices. So what have you learned from this choice that you've made? So whatever the choice is, fill in the blank. Tell from as the parent, from a curiosity perspective, can you tell me more about this choice and what you've learned by making this choice? And in that process, you can help them to actually see that maybe those choices are not the best, or they may have reasons that they think that they are, and you might get a different perspective to the choices that they're making.
Great. And I think we have one final question. Can you suggest some techniques for family and group discussions that might be stressful or anxious, especially just around COVID or political in nature? And how can individuals share their feelings with family members and friends, and how can they support each other?
Yeah, so when we're talking about feelings and talking about the elections and COVID, there's a lot of intensity to it. So to recognize that and to actually first and foremost kind of frame the question in that regard and say, there's a lot of intensity in regards to the election, to COVID, and I want this to be an open space, a safe space for us to be able to talk, and having it be one-on-one or as a family, we want to be able to open up that forum for you. So if you were actually having this conversation with one person, what would be a better space for you to have this conversation? Would you like it to be all of us, or would you like it to be just me, or would you like it just to be, your brother or whomever the family member or person may be? So giving some different choices. And then to be able to almost kind of paint the picture of what we've done here is to, create the forum in a space that it's non-judgmental, that it's a collaborative, that it's a supportive partnership, and everyone has a voice, and that, in that process, we respect everyone in what their, feelings are, what their, perspective is. And from that, we can learn from it. So that would be something that I think is, very challenging to create. But once you create it and you build it in these small steps with primarily that non-judgmental perspective, for some things that you may be a little set back from, but being very open and just from a curiosity perspective, you're going to get a better outcome.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Susan. This has been great. I want to thank you so much for your time today, for sharing your knowledge and your insight with us, and also your perspective as a MUD parent. It's really terrific. So thank you also to our parent participants for joining the call tonight and for attending this event. We will follow up with within the next week with the recorded video and the presentation material for your reference. And future events can be found on the upcoming events page at hmc.edu/parents. So we welcome your suggestions for future events, or if you're interested in hosting one, please email us at parents@hmc.edu. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us, and have a wonderful evening. Good night.
Good night.